I've had the opportunity to represent a lot of clients that have built their business over time, have gotten quite wealthy, but unfortunately in a non-liquid type manner. They have their own private companies, and suddenly they've hit their maturity and have decided to sell their company, and they go from being wealthy with privately held stock and suddenly have a large liquidity event, and it's very foreign to them. They just, they don't necessarily know, where do I go with this? And it's always this issue of people coming out of the woodwork. You can just imagine that when there's a company sale and it's announced in the BizTimes or whatever it happens to be, that these people are getting calls, and it might be, it's the brother-in-law, it's the insurance agent, it's the broker down the street. And how do you start to sort of juggle through all that and say, all right, what am I really looking for? And our firm has a very large employee benefits practice, and these are multi-employer pension plans. And what they do is they have an investment committee, and the investment committee actually hires a consultant. The consultant doesn't really run money or manage money, but the consultant sits down and puts together an investment policy statement for these multi-employer plans. It says, all right, here's what we've got. Here's what our needs are down the road to pay out these retirement benefits to our participants in our plan. We need to put together an investment policy, an allocation that has the best chance of meeting our goals without taking too much risk. So you have this idea of, all right, I've got certain payout obligations, I have certain risk parameters of what I'm doing, and what that consultant then does is puts together an investment policy statement and an allocation of assets. And as Jay has pointed out, this diversified, balanced portfolio. Now, think of a piece of, the old pie diagram. Your pie might look different with larger pieces of equity and bond or fixed income and other alternative investments. But at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to zero in on this and say, all right, this is the best chance of getting me there. And then what this consultant does is actually goes out and finds individual money managers to run these different slots on the pie. You might be picking up a fixed income manager. You might be picking up a large cap equity, small cap, all these different pieces of the pie. And then what the consultant does is is the clearinghouse. This is a very transparent process. The consultant acts in that clearinghouse capacity, making sure that the managers are doing a good job, making sure that you're always rebalancing your portfolio over time, this long-term view, and monitoring with benchmarks to say, all right, this guy's not doing quite as well, or this particular manager lost their key person. We should really put them on the watch list and start to go forward. And that's just if you've got enough money, that's a great way to do it, because you have a very transparent process, and you'll see this as we're going through here. But we've been able to take that, and for clients that have a large net worth after selling a business and such, have put together RFPs and brought consultants in, and I've sat through just tons of proposals by these various folks. And at the end of the day, they all, if we've done a good job vetting them on the front end, they all sound pretty much the same. They are doing what they need to be doing with this process of sitting down and figuring out, what does the client want, what is their risk tolerance, what do they need to get paid out, and how do we structure the portfolio to do that, and now go out and pick these managers. And I've also often sat through these things, and at the end of maybe sitting through 4 or 5 during the course of the day, we'll typically run them like an hour a piece with a half-hour break between them. You come out of there and say, boy, at the end of the day, these guys are all pretty good. They'd all do a pretty good job for you. And it comes down to sort of what Jeff was saying when Warren Buffett was making that investment decision, looking him in the eye and just having this comfort level to say, yeah, I really like this person. I think I can work with them, and I'm confident that they have all the tools and experience and all those things behind them. So I've had that process, and with that, I think I was really fortunate. These guys, we didn't go through this speech beforehand and say, all right, what are you going to say? What are you going to, how are you going to follow it? The speakers before me, Jeff and Jay, have really set me up perfectly in a couple of big picture issues that came out in the discussions, and you'll see this in the course of my presentation as well. I had actually asked Jeff that first question and didn't know what his answer was going to be about, how does this whole Warren Buffett thing sort of drill down to the folks sitting here? You're not going to be going out there buying candy companies or reinsurance companies or whatever it happens to be. And he said a couple of things. Get a good advisor. Well, I guess that's one of the things I'm talking about right here. Look at that long-term hold, another thing that Jay sort of talked about. Just, in my opinion, critical. The chart that he had up there talking about how does the average stock fund do, I think it was 8.8 or something, and how does the individual investor in the stock fund do, about 3.8. That's not a long-term hold. That's this idea of not having the discipline to stick with your investment policy and working through it on a long-term basis. The other thing he said was, if you don't have the time to do it, and I challenge anybody in here to think that they really have the time to sit down on a daily basis and do the monitoring and everything else you need to do to have a long-term, comprehensive, workable policy. He said buy an index fund. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And the other thing that Jay said that I thought was really interesting, even the analysts can't forecast. So if you think that you're going to be watching TV and reading the Wall Street Journal and you're going to be beating the market, good luck. I just don't think it's going to happen. Secondly, this idea of people always tend to put their money in what was popular last week. If you have this comprehensive investment policy, here's what you're getting from an investment advisor. You're getting two things. If you come away from my speech with two things, you get a 30,000-foot view. It's this idea of having somebody pull all the information together for you of your portfolio, regardless of what different pieces you have. You might have a 401k, you might have an investment account, you might have kids' assets. This whole works. Working through and saying, all right, what do we need to do with this thing? What do you want to try to accomplish? What's your risk tolerance on working through over the next 10 years, 5 years, or whatever your particular horizon happens to be? Sitting down with you, putting that investment policy statement together, working with you, putting that allocation together, and then making you stick to it. So what you're getting is this 30,000-foot view, and it sounds a little odd, but what you're paying for is discipline. It's you're having somebody sit down with you on a monthly basis to say, all right, here's where we are. Here's how your portfolio is performing. Here are the individual benchmarks that we've established for each of these various allocation pieces in your pie. We're doing fine, so that you don't have this desire so that when you've got the neighbor or the brother-in-law who's saying, boy, I've just made a killing in this particular stock. They never talk about their losers. You have to be able to say, great, I'm happy with that, but I understand the big picture on where I'm going, and I'm going to just be sticking with it. So those are some of the sort of the big picture. And